Let us assume that y has been somehow transformed into x over a period of time, and that period of time is probably several years. And to find out what should have been this y in the process of reaching to x, should have been after some time period. Can we call this as a kind of median between x and y? Or alternatively, you have probably a rock object, or let us say sand grain at time t. Over a period of time, that grain has become like this. So, can we find out what is the morphological relationship between these two? And the time interval between these two, let us say probably some 6 months. 6 months. And can you try making a prediction what should have been its structure after probably 90 days, 3 months, and how to actually make such kind of predictions? You have one source and target. You have a source and target, and we can compute the median between xt and xt plus 1. So how do we handle that is xt intersection xt plus 1, xt union xt plus 1. Typically what happens, and when you take the intersection of xt and xt plus 1, let me say that this, and intersection portion is the portion. Union portion is the portion. This is the portion. So what we do is the union we keep on shrinking, and intersection we keep on dilating, and then we take the intersection of these two. Do this process, take the union of all outputs from n ranging between 0 to capital N. What you get would be the median between these two. This is the median. For this case, you look at it, the median between x and y. Here also we take x intersection y, x union y, and we keep dilating this, we keep eroding this, take the intersection, and then take the union from n is equal to 0 to capital N. Typically what you get is the union of x and y is this, intersection of x and y is this, and this you dilate, and this you erode, and take the intersection, and you do that process for all n values, and they actually meet somewhere here, and that would be the output that you get out of this. So this is for a simple binary case. I don't go into details. Actually, it's a long paper which I published in IEEE Transaction of Pattern Analysis and Machine Intelligence. Visualization of hierarchically generated median elements for spatiotemporal map analysis. That was the title. It was published in 2010. I would probably share it, and you can look it on my web page, and that paper would be there. And if you want more details, and I have just shown in a shorter form, and it has different, the relationships, distance-based relationships, and then how to compute these medians for various different cases. Some cases are the object is just the same over a period of time. There is no variation. Sometimes the object is like this, and then it has become like this over a period of time. It is contained in this. Sometimes object is this, and over a period of time that is shifted and deformed. And then sometimes object is this, and it is completely shifted. They are disjoint. Sometimes object is this, and over a period of time object is vanished. So how do you compute the interpolation, these medians for various different cases? One generic equation is this: take the intersections, take the union, and then union contract, and intersection you expand, and take the intersection of those two outputs, and finally you take the union for all n values. But when it is the case, and it has shifted, and it is disjoint, and there is no intersection, so probably union is this. For that case, what we do, and we take the convex hull, and then this is x, this is y. Between x and this is convex hull. Between x and convex hull, you compute median by following the generic equation. Between y and convex hull, you compute the median. Take those two medians will have some overlap, and you compute the median for those two medians. And so there are different ways. And similarly, there exists a set, but over a period of time, that set was vanished. Then where is the source? The target is not there. Then what we do, we completely erode this until last but one level, thinking that before it gets vanished, it reaches to the last but one level, and then it's vanished. And then between this is x, and this is surrogate of x, and call this as y, and between these two you compute the interpolation. So all that would be there in that particular paper. But extending this to the functions, let f and g are the two functions. F and g are two functions like DEM, or you put that f at time t and f at time t plus 1, or f at 1 and f at time t. You have these two functions, same function, the function of the same region at two different time periods, and there are changes. How changes will happen on terrestrial surfaces? At some places there will be accretion, some places there is erosion, at some places there is no change. In turn, that is not a simple process, but there is no kind of a phase synchronization. And there is some accretion, suddenly there is erosion, suddenly there is no variation. This is how surfaces will alter, right? And under such circumstances, computing the median function between f1 and f2 would be a real challenge. Not only that, and you have 30-meter resolution, 90-meter resolution. So register both of them to the same scale, and then you compute, call 30-meter resolution as f1 and call 90-meter resolution as f2, and then you start computing the interpolation in between. Can we relate that with a kind of probably is it 60-meter resolution? We don't know. So these are all various different possible options you have, and computation of median between f1 and f2. Again, f1 infimum, f2. Infimum is point-wise minimum value. You have two functions. And point-wise between these 2 points, what is the minimum? And that minimum will record, right? And like that, for every point, its corresponding point, what is the minimum, we will record. We have f1, f2, infima of f1 and f2, and similarly suprema of f1 and f2, suprema of and f1, f2, and then this one we keep eroding this. This one we keep dilating, and then take the infima between these two outputs, take the suprema for all n values ranging between 0 to capital N. So by doing this, you get a median function between these two. It's a hierarchical process. Once you have a source and target, median, between median and source, between median and target, you can create two more. This grows in 2 power n form. So you can do that until there is no further change happening in the entire sequence of pardon?
Uniform rate or non-uniform rate?
It's a completely non-uniform fashion because the erosion dilations are non-linear operations.
No, we are
Non-linear
taking
operations.
time period of 6 months. So
Oh
how will our program decide that it will be uniform non?
no, so this is whatever the median that we are computing is a non-weighted median.
Okay.
The moment you put some kind of weights in the sense dilation should happen with more weight and erosion should happen with lesser weight. So then what you have to do, you have to introduce some parameter, probably alpha, is in between 0 and 1. So if this alpha is 0.75, dilation is happening, much rapid scale, and then 1 minus alpha is the erosion, that is at 0.25, and erosion would happen much slower rate. So if you include those things, and then it would become a kind of weighted median. So what will happen if these two are the objects in a simple binary case? Binary case, intersection would be dilated and union would be eroded. Intersection is getting dilated very slowly, but union is getting eroded much faster, slowly and much faster. And then you take the rest of the parameters like this. And then eventually you will see for this kind of case that interpolation would come somewhere here. Somewhere here. This is I would call it as a weighted median. Mostly weighted medians would help us to achieve results closer to the reality, right? But just to explain the principle involved in recursive computation of median functions, these are the equations involved. These are the equations involved. So this n is also very important parameter. What is that capital N? Is it taking large number of iterations to reach this capital N? If it is taking that, probably the distance between the source F1 and F2 is much longer. The distance is too high. And if it is taking just a few iterations, with n is 0, 1, 2, 3, it is reaching to convergence and you are getting the median function, I think they are close enough. They are close enough. And so these ideas we are using not only for DEM based studies, but also for hyperspectral image cube. And because there the very one fancy field is band selection, dimensionality reduction. You have so many channels, and many of those channels are probably a kind of redundancy. And how to remove, detect and remove those redundant channels, so that our computation complexity would be significantly reduced. And these are some of the applications. And probably I'll quickly show some slides, and then I think you can link some of these equations. You will see many of those relevant pictures which you can link with the equations, with many of the slides that I would show. I would skip a lot of text here, and there is no point really repeating the same things. And this you have seen. This also I will just avoid. This is about some hyperspecific things. You have seen these pictures in one single slide, and this is good example. Like as I mentioned, digital elevation models, DEM, an excellent example for the spatial data where you can show the applications of a host of various morphological transformations that now you are familiar with. You can see all this you are familiar with now, and the Ridge Valley network extraction from DEMs. DEM partitioning actually I have not covered, and this is a skeletonization by influence zones, weighted skeletonization by influence zones. It has number of applications. This is also one type of interpolation which I have not covered. And superficial roughness characterization quantification via granulometries, which are scale invariant but shape dependent power laws. And if you change your B, the kind of roughness that you get would be entirely different. But they are scale invariant but shape dependent. And morphing via hierarchical median computations. And these two actually I have not covered, ranks for pairs of images in DEM classification. And if in a database, if you have large number of DEMs, if you have to pair them, and we have given one ranking equation that is mostly by computing the distance between every image to every other image. And then you get, if there are 100 images in one database, you will get 100 by 100 matrix. And then we also take a ratio called Suprema ratio, Suprema and Infima ratio, and then we multiply that with erosion dilation distances, which I have actually not covered, and that would really give you an idea about how ranking for pairs of images. This is to actually tell which are those two images in a database are forming the best pair, which are those two images are the worst pair, which are significantly differing from each other. And how these above studies could be really useful in understanding superficial process dynamics. There were some ideas I have given, and very quickly I will show. And so this we are talking, and these are some of the words, main ingredients of any spatio-temporal dynamics, understanding of spatio-temporal dynamics. So you have data, very precise noise-free data, and you should be able to retrieve very unique hidden features, and you require good algorithms for that. That comes under retrieval. And then analysis. One good analysis technique which I can explain is a computation of fractal dimension and of course roughness measurements. And then reasoning, and I didn't really cover. So actually the relationship, distance relationship and topological relationship, such kind of things, the quantitative reasoning, which has more relevance to spatial data science, and modeling and visualization, where you have interpolations and extrapolations. And these are some of the DEMs that we have considered. You have a synthetic Hortonian DEM, and we have some TOPSAR DEMs which were acquired from JPL, Jet Propulsion Laboratories, which have been JPL has generated DEMs for whole Malaysian Peninsula, and then some of those images far right side. And then these bottom ones are SRTM DEM and Cartosat DEM, so which were scaled to the same degree. And the last one is actually the San Francisco Bay bottom topographic region, which was acquired through ground penetrating radar to see how the sand ripples are actually forming under the water. And you have seen this Matheron and John Serra, and these are the broad fields of branches of mathematical morphology, binary, grayscale, graph, and adaptive mathematical morphology. And you know several of these transformations now, morphological erosion, dilation, opening, closing, multi-scale morphological operations, Hiter-Miss transformation I have not covered, thinning, thickening I have not covered, geodesic morphological operations were not covered, but you know morphological skeletonization, skis and weighted skis I have not covered, but granulometries and anti-granulometries. Anti-granulometries also I have not covered. And there are other distances are very interesting, morphological distances Hausdorff dilation distances, Hausdorff erosion distances. These are some of the list of some useful transformations. And you know these equations also, and I would skip many of these things. And extraction, you look at that the landscape, DM, synthetic landscape, and how it looks when it is binarized. This is one of the thresholded elevation regions by choosing least threshold value, the middle one, and then bottom one is a possible skeleton of that particular DEM. And this also I explained when synthetic landscape is having blue, red, and green regions, and then thresholded elevation regions, their corresponding skeletons. Finally, to compute the skeleton. That is an explanation of the algorithm that I have explained. And you look at here, and this is already shown. There are green lines and blue lines, not quite visible, but I believe they are visible here. And all green lines are the valley connectivity network. Blue lines are the ridge connectivity network. And synthetic landscapes, and you look at that is a fractal object. From that fractal object, network was extracted and order designated, and then while reconstructing the original fractal object, and we have given some color coding for all the reconstructed regions, and when we took the union of all those reconstructed topologically prominent regions, and we got this, and this one is a kind of landscape, and we have exaggerated this in a vertical exaggeration zone, and there the landscape that we got. Further, okay, these are the things with better clarity. And watershed partitioning, look at there are some 645 irrigation tanks here, and their corresponding zones of influence were constructed like this. That is followed by, there is a powerful transformation in morphology, watershed transformation. And if you allow all water bodies to flood uniformly, and where exactly those floodwater front lines extinguish each other, and you draw a kind of line which is watershed line, or you construct a dam, and then that's how each of the water body will be having its corresponding zone of influence. There are 645 zones of influence, and then we have actually computed their area, perimeter, longest axis, shortest axis, lengths, and then we derived certain power law relationships, and with which we have confirmed that they are indeed universal, they are indeed following universal fractal scale invariant measures. And this is again an example of skeletonization of zone of influence, and with different propagating speeds. I said all the water bodies are allowed to flood and propagate with uniform speed, and if you create water body specific propagation speeds, and then you are including some kind of weights and how it would look, and you look at there are 4 states, not for natural phenomena I have shown, there are 4 states, and they have their corresponding centroids, and those centroids were taken as the seeds and allowed them to propagate with different speeds, and how those pictures were formed. And this has some connection with cartogram studies, and mostly in digital cartography and for visualization, and which is actually a computational geometry problem. I would skip these things. Okay, this was the question somebody was asking in the morning, and these are the 3 different networks. So they are topologically invariant but geometrically highly different. And for that, morphological shape decomposition is the approach that we have followed. And so Apollonian space is packed with octagons of various different sizes. The idea that we have transformation we have followed is morphological shape decomposition. The main principle involved there was opening for the highest number of cycles. This is hierarchically performed. And then you look at here, there is a network. That network, from the network, we have computed the whole basin by following recursive multi-scale closing cycles, and then finally this is the network, and after cycle 1 closing, cycle 2 closing, after several higher degrees of cycles of closing, and the last level, this is the one. And then if you subtract this network from its corresponding closed hull, and you get fat fractal. That is what is the white region here, and then that white region we have termed it as non-network space. Typically, the region that is occupied by the hill slope, and you pack those non-network space with non-overlapping disks, and then those non-overlapping disk number and radii would give us an option to compute the power law relationship. And this is how it looks. This is how it looks after packing the hill slope region with octagonal type structuring element. And we have derived several power law values which are scale invariant but shape dependent. So what happens when you perform grayscale granulometry? You have a DM here. As you keep on increasing the application of opening cycles with respect to rhombus as the structuring element, you can see that it is losing information, it is getting darkened and darkened, and this one is getting brightened and brightened under the dual operation, that is closing for increasing cycles. Same process with respect to octagonal structuring element, same process with respect to square type of structuring element. And they also yield us the measures granulometric index values which are scale invariant but shape dependent. By the way of having different structuring elements, rhombus, octagon and square, we get three different granulometric index values. And this also I have explained as the directional. So this particular watershed has high directional roughness in this particular direction, whereas this one has this direction. These three watersheds have this vertical direction, it has a high roughness value, and whereas these watersheds have roughness is very high in this particular direction. That's how we have done a classification, and this classification done was based on a simple granulometric index. We have taken granulometric index values between 0 and 1, and we categorized 0 to 0.25, 0.25 to 0.5, 0.5 to 0.75, above 0.75. There are four different categories we have shown. And this is low directional roughness. In which direction this watershed, this particular watershed yields lowest roughness? Is it in B1 direction, B2 or B3 or B4? And you can see those classifications. I think these are some of the supporting material.
So, kindly explain a little bit about what is power law relationship and how it is associated with evolution of topography.
You mean power law?
Power law, huh? Simple. You gave an example of basins where you classify those small basins. Then you said something. It is following power law relationship. So I didn't understand completely.
Which small basin?
In the
Water body?
water bodies, yeah. Yeah. No, back. Yeah.
This one?
This one, huh? So
So here you have this octagonal blocks, this octagonal features of various different radii. There are very small, there are medium size, there are big size, and these are all the octagons, right? And each has a specific size category and size versus number. Smaller size category are large in number, which were packed in the network, non-network space, and larger sized octagons are small in number. And when we plotted that, that's what we have shown in, yeah, so somewhere here. I think we have shown those relationships, log radius of structuring element and log cumulative number, and then we could see that there is a linear relationship, and the slope values are universal across all scales, and at all scales considered from here to here, and it is yielding the same power law relation. And here if you look at the typical power law is exponent value is 1.5, and this is also for I think number radius relation, number radius relation. And like this we have done more rigorous study, not on this kind of packed octagons, but on water bodies. And you have seen earlier that 645 water bodies and their corresponding zones of influence, they are following universality power law relationship. And that 645 water bodies, we have taken 2,89,000 water bodies. And they are also yielding more or less similar power laws, which are scale invariant. And a portion of that is that 645 water bodies. So the typical fractal definition of the fractal is you take a larger data and then you derive some power laws, which you call them as some fractal dimensions or fractal power laws. You take any minor portion of that whole region, and then you find out whether the power laws that are derived for that minor portion, whether it has any relationship with the larger area. So the moment you see the similar relationships and you call them, these are all fractals. The fractal, and you take any minor region and you zoom it and it reflects the overall structure.
So does it mean that, example, a catchment is there? So my graph is, let's say, x, and x is the let's say x is the slope. No, x is the discharge, and y is the slope. Okay, so now for this two parameter, for a whole catchment, there will be one relationship, and within this catchment there will be small sub catchments. So like small tributaries will be there. So in that tributary also, the relationship between discharge and slope. So it means if whole catchment is so does it mean that like whole catchment is following the power law relationship? Does it mean that as a whole it is relationship? Is it like that?
No. So theoretically speaking, I don't know about the slope and discharge relationship, but we know the relationship between number of first orders, number of second orders, number of third orders. It follows power law relation. And similarly, mean length of the first orders, mean length of the second orders, they follow power law relation. Whether you take the whole river network or you take one sub basin or sub watershed of the whole river basin and then you compute these things. And there also we say that here it is following a kind of power law relationship, and here in a sub watershed is also following a power law relationship. Indeed, they are fractals. And but for slope and discharge, I think there were studies, but I didn't do much on slope and discharge.
Okay.
There were studies actually. You will see many such works in water resource research. I don't know in earth surface process whether there is any such study. Huh? WRR, because there is a group, and there is an Italian group, Renzo Rosso, La Barbara. They all have used heavily the fractal geometry ideas on river networks. And, there were other people, Andrea Rinaldo, Iturbe, Rodriguez Iturbe, Ignacio, yes. I think you have to look at that book, Fractal River Basins, Chance and Chaos, by Rodriguez Iturbe, Ignacio, and Andrea Rinaldo. That's a fantastic book. I think you will get a lot of this power.
Yeah.
There are other like fractals, chaos, power laws by Manfred Schoder, not related to geosciences, but it's very powerful. So he is basically an electrical engineer, wrote a nice book, Fractals, Chaos, Power Laws. But in geoscience context, these are powerful groups. Rodriguez Iturbe, Andrea Rinaldo, Amos Martin, It's actually Jayant Banawar, and Jayant Banawar, he worked on all kinds of networks, protein networks, DNA networks, social networks, river networks. It's very interesting.
So suppose in a large, there is a large system where I found some relationship which is showing power law relationship, and there is a small thing subsystem inside the system. It is also showing that same relationship, and I could understand that from using this small subsystem, I derived all the possible reasons why it is like this. If both are same, then can I extrapolate the reason and cause of the for whole basin? Is it possible? Matlab,
Actually,
if
theoretically speaking, when there are two systems which are yielding universal power law relationship, and we would say that those power laws would explain us the commonly sharing physical mechanisms between the systems. That is one aspect.
yeah,
The other aspect is that we don't know what is the correct scale. What is the correct scale? And should we use that very information that is retrieved from the small scale data or larger scale data, coarser resolution data or finer resolution data? And we don't have, in particularly in the superficial terrestrial surface analysis, which is the correct scale to study. But when you take multiple scales and derive some power law relationship, when they follow universality relationship, and we say you choose any scale, and using this power law, you can actually extrapolate what would be this particular value at this particular scale. And that is where power laws would be very useful for geoscientists. For theoretical physics, yes, and it is showing a universal power law relationship, and they say that it is a universal constant. But again, for geoscientists, okay, which is the best scale, correct scale to use? If you are keen, you should look at Simon Levin. Simon Levin was actually a mathematical ecologist at Princeton University. He has written very popular articles on this allometric power law relation. Simon Levin. He was a remarkable mathematician, but who talks a lot about ecology.
so in nature, I believe some examples exist where this power law concept can be understood. Is there any example in nature?
Where power laws?
Can you
Yeah, there are many examples.
like
These animals, number, and warmness of the blood, the animals, and they derive power laws, and then all botanical trees. The trees. Actually, allometry started from medical medicine and biology. And trees, and what is the height of the tree? What is the canopy volume of the tree? And in biological systems, metabolic rate, and even if you take a bronchial tree, blood vein system, they are all networks. They all follow power laws. They all follow power laws.
okay.
Very prominent power laws are Hurst and Axe exponent. Hurst exponent, if it is exactly 1, you say it is self-similar. If it is less than 1, they are self-similar, self-affine. All the features that we see in nature are more or less self-affine factors, not exactly self-similar.
Yeah, thank you.
I think there is a lot of literature available, and it would be interesting. Okay. Then, so last slide probably I will. Yeah, we have seen all this, and this is the width function I was talking. for different basins, there are different kind of width functions. So width functions are for some simple basins where it is like a planar form, it is like this. So if you consider all thresholded elevation regions and then compute width functions, and you see a kind of variation. We call this as a kind of geodesic spectrum. And again, linking that with the process is still a challenge for me. And these are the source and target DEMs and a host of morphological medians that we could compute. And you can look at the source and target here. And between these two, and we have created one median function. Between these two, another median function. Between these two, another median function. This is a hierarchical process, and you can hierarchically generate interpolated sequences until there is no further scope for you to insert one more. And skis and weighted skis, probably let me skip. This is for visualization purpose mostly. And ranks for pairs of images. This is where how to compute the distance between let us say Fi and Fj. And we take the suprema of Fi and Fj, we will compute the area. We take the infima of Fi and Fj, and we keep dilating that until the area of the dilated version becomes larger than the area of the suprema of Fi and Fj. So what is that minimum n required to satisfy that property is actually the distance between Fi and Fj. This is the dilation distance. Similarly, you take suprema, its corresponding area, you keep eroding this until this becomes lesser than the area of the infima of Fi and Fj. And what is that n satisfying that property? Minimum n, that is erosion distance. These two distances are very interesting to find out probably the similar basins. To study the spatial variability and these two basins, because the distances are very close to each other, and then you can tell that it would lead to some inference. And these are all some of the interaction matrices, area interaction matrices for infima of source and target, and distance interaction matrix between source and target, erosion distance interaction matrix. And finally, using those parameters, you can compute the rank for every possible pair, Fi and Fj, and this ratio, area of infima and area of suprema, and the minimum of erosion dilation distance and maximum of erosion dilation distance. And from this, for all possible pairs of images in the database, you can create a kind of interaction matrix. And then finally, you can pair them, which is the best paired image and which is the least best paired images. And we have given some of those results here. So that is the idea. So just to explain that ranking for the pairs of images, we have taken a DEM and we made it into 4 quadrants, and then from every quadrant to every other quadrant, and we get a 4x4 interaction matrix for infima, suprema, and dilation distance and erosion distance, and finally we compute the ranks. So you have 4 quadrants, and which two are the best pair, which two are the least best pair, and we have given these two are the best pair, and so these two are not so best pair. This is just for a kind of toy example we have shown. And similar ideas we have extended on SRTM and AutoSat DEM. Then spatial reasoning is not a relevant topic here. And you can have a look at it. These are some of the special issues we edited: spatial information retrieval, analysis, reasoning, and modeling. And this was a long time back. We have published this for IGRS. And this is more of theory advances in mathematical morphology, filtering and segmentation with mathematical morphology. We have released this special issue for in honoring Professor John Serra on his 70th birthday. This was in 2012. This was the actually IEEE. This society has asked us to showcase Indian remote sensing. There were some 19 papers we published. This was the first ever special issue to showcase the Indian remote sensing achievement. You can see the one of the editors was that SRTM chief. One of the guest editors here, Paul Rosen. Paul Rosen is here. He is the SRTM chief, the Special Radar Photography. He comes very often to SNAC. He is coming on 22nd because he is also the team leader for NASA ISRO Synthetic Aperture Radar mission, ISAR mission. And he is a big man from JPL NASA. This was one book and where you can see some of the results that I have shown. Then there is a chapter 35 here. I always help this association. In chapter 35 we have shown some of these. This is one call for papers. Now if you understood morphology nicely, and there is a call for papers, that window would be opened in October, coming October. So until March 2021, we have some great work about communicating to this technique. So this is about mathematical morphology in geosciences and remote sensing. Yes, with all this, what is the use and can we really generate a kind of attractor? As I mentioned at the very beginning of the lecture today morning, like for pendulum, frictionless pendulum and fixed pendulum and those kind of attractors can we really derive? Probably for moraine-like things and then alluvial fans. So is it following any kind of pattern? Is that pattern very simple pattern? If that pattern of that attractor is very simple, obviously it will have low fractal dimension. If it has very complicated trajectory, it will have high fractal dimension. And the trajectories, paths which are possessing high fractal dimension are all called high dimensional attractors, for which the predicting predictability is rather difficult. But for the systems which are showing very simple attractors, predicting predictability is rather straightforward. But can we really go towards that line of thinking? But for each geomorphic system, can we really create a kind of attractor? And how complex is that attractor? How simple is that attractor? We have a whole lot of other body of knowledge coming from fractal characterization to characterize those attractors. So one of those attractors were very simple attractor. This is talking about population dynamics. If you have some interest in demography, how population grows and how death rate dominates, and under different strength of nonlinearity parameters, and this attractor is based on a simple first order nonlinear differential equation, where the recipe is raise is to fall, and when the population grows beyond the limit, and then there will be a resource crunch, and then people start dying, and it follows a wonderful first order nonlinear differential equation. If you iterate that one dimensional nonlinear differential equation, and you see a kind of numbers how they change. Sometimes with low lambda value here, and the death rate increases, it attracts to initial condition. At reasonably, this lambda is in between 0 and 4. At 2 strength of nonlinearity, the population grows and stabilizes. At the lambda, which is at 4, at the higher strength of nonlinearity, the trajectory goes back and forth, and it doesn't settle down anywhere. And this is what is called chaos. And but if you find out a kind of pattern, and then the behavior of that particular system can easily be predicted subsequently. So that was the idea in many of the non-linear physics ideas given through this strange attractor construction. And we have, these are all some kind of toy models we have shown. See, the open challenge is can we really construct system specific attractors with all these ingredients? Addressing such a challenge may provide rich clues and insights in our strides and struggle to make precise predictions. At the end, this is not a job of one person. A great teamwork with excellent coordination is required. Some of the references. Thank you very much for your great patience that you have shown without anything. Hope you will not have nightmares tonight and sitting this.
Work is done only in DMs, or we can have some like geophysical data,
No, in geophysical data, there's many applications. Geophysical data in the sense, do you use
like
some
gravity data,
gravity
seismic
maps?
data.
Yes,
Yeah.
any spatial data.
And that can be used, I mean, if I want to predict something
Yes,
using seismic data or say gravity data, then I have to take data for longer time.
yes,
Then only I can understand that pattern
yes,
and simulate it using.
yes. In
Okay.
geophysical gravity maps, resistivity maps, seismic maps.
Yes.
If you have this data in a spatial form at different depths
Yes.
and at different heights and at different time periods, at different spatial resolutions, all this can be used. The moment you have the data in a spatial form, all xy positions, coordinate positions, you have some variable changing. I would tell you, and this has lot of applications in spatial demography, spatial economics. At each grid level, and you have some GDP value, primary GDP, secondary GDP, tertiary GDP values. How this is actually surface. But here the variable that we have chosen is the elevation. But in demographic studies or economic studies, we choose the variable as some economic parameter or demographic parameter. They are also surfaces, and they are also not amount of prediction requirement. See, that's where I gave a talk December 27. I don't know you are familiar with Professor C.R. Rao. Have you heard of him? So C.R. Rao is now 100 years old. He's still living. He was a powerful statistician. People call him as the father of multivariate statistics. He was the director of Indian Statistical Institute when he retired in 1978. He moved to America. He was a professor at Penn State University, Liberty Research Professor. He was a National Medal of Science winner at United States. He's 100 years. So on his 100 years centenary birthday celebrations, I was invited to talk on data sciences. So I simply changed the title, Mathematical Morphology in Spatial Data Science. And so that's what I'm telling. There are audience with multiple backgrounds. There are demographers, there are statisticians, there are econometricians, there are geoscientists, geophysicists, and it would go well because these mathematical ideas are very fundamental in nature. They can be applied, but you should be intuitive. As long as you are intuitive and whichever area that you want to choose, you can really show applications. When I first started about, it was in 1991. I was very mediocre, below average student in College of Technology. That's where my guru, who learned mathematical morphology a bit, during his fag end of his career in IIT Kharagpur, he went to Fontainebleau, where this mathematical morphology took birth. And then he came back and he started talking about only mathematical morphology. So I was one of the fortunate guys, learned the very basics of morphology. At the end, I was able to really participate with him in many discussions. Subsequently, you have seen John Serra was my good friend. John Serra used to visit me very often. He also gave me that Matran award. So what I say is stick to one one field, and there will be a lot of distraction. Seeing other people, oh, they are going publishing more papers. Just stick to science is a beautiful field. To that, and seriously, it is not just the, there is wavelet theory. Many people talk about wavelet, its applications in geoscience, but all the wavelet transformations are linear operations. Here, everything is non-linear, and at one level, fathers of all these fields, they are all good friends. Some fields have grown very fast, some fields didn't grow. So I always feel bad about seeing mathematical morphology in a different place compared to other fields. It is fine. And so always evolution is better than revolution. Slowly evolving systems are very nice. So easy to understand.
Morphological entropy, you used a term. So,
That is same as uncertainty index,
acha,
randometric index.
acha, acha. So I guess there must be a way to quantify
Yes.
morphological entropy.
Yeah. So if the morphological entropy, which is nothing but the randometric index, is very low, means that particular system has no much capacity to change for any kind of pattern. And as I mentioned, very rugged systems where there is high roughness. Obviously, there is high uncertainty index. So, with erosion dilations as perturbations or dilation erosions as perturbations, and it will have a lot of capacity to change. That the whole, the underlying function area would drastically change, reduce, or gain under different cascade operations.
Okay. Uh, so, so, to, so these to quantify morphological entropy, we are assuming that system E was evolved in a uniform way. So,
So, if we have a time series data, let us
um,
say the specific surface, so how it was some 10 million years back, how it is being evolved.
yeah,
If you have a sufficiently large set of data in a chronological sequence, and by computing this morphological entropy, can we say that this entropy is going towards one specific direction, or
okay,
is it oscillating, or highly irregular system has become regular and again it has become irregular? Don't know these phases. So this is one tool to really abstract the behavior of a specific system.
okay. Let's say at present condition, I have estimated a morphological entropy for a particular basin, assuming that it has evolved in a uniform way. Then I found that there are some catastrophic things has happened. So how can I incorporate those things in to modify my morphological entropy? Is there any way to do that, or what is that?
If there is a catastrophic thing, I would say there is an episode, and that episodic interval, always episodic intervals are not at regular intervals. But it's again a challenge. You can say that it has changed its phase. After the catastrophe happened, probably the system is behaving completely in a different way.
Yeah. So, like a simple example, if I give, uh, so when flood occurs, there is a particular. So, in a river, generally flood used to occur in Brahmaputra like every 1 year or every 2 year. In summer, flood used to occur, and because of that, there are some sedimentation. There are rate of sedimentation, and suddenly so most probably so that will follow some law, power law, maybe, I don't know, some law, and suddenly so in between there are some catastrophic floods which are not normal, and they have
Because
different.
organized
Yeah, destroyed. And those catastrophic event has a specific way of aggregation of sediments. So this is, let's say, within human time interval, like 30 years data. And then now so then I found a event which is very old, like 6,000 years old. So now question is, can I extrapolate the I know this information, there's a background information. Every 2 years there is a flood, and there is a episodic information which I have documented. Let's say someone has documented, which is not much, let's say one or two. Now, at 6,000 years ago, there is an event. Now, I need to quantify what was the rate of sedimentation at that time. So, is there any way to extrapolate from present these two information?
Yeah, but I don't know whether such extrapolations would really
Yeah. This is the first question.
help us. But locally, local predictions would be successful. Local predictions in the sense you are telling in the last 30 years. I think at cosmological scale it is
Very minute.
very minor.
Yeah.
But locally, we probably many systems are predictable, and it again depends on what is it slowly time varying or highly time varying. Highly time varying, I always give the change of cloud structure, so highly dynamic, but it doesn't stand at one place. So many of these interpolations, extrapolations, if it is happening at one place, I think where our DEMs would be very useful. Even sediment accumulation, that accretion erosion, because it happens at one place. But some of the systems are very difficult, like hurricane structure. It spirals, it moves. It spirals, it moves. And how do we really interpolate those things? We have time sequential data, very nice. But they say you interpolate and you rotate and all that would complicate the whole process. But again, shoreline extrapolation, I have seen. I think since you mentioned the word extrapolation and the interpolated that median line has connection with the prediction of the extrapolated shoreline, particularly shorelines, and they don't change very systematically. There is accretion, there is erosion, there is no change. It makes the whole process complicated. And then you take the series of for 10 years the shoreline variations, and then you start computing the successive shorelines, the median lines, and you see is there a pattern in the median lines. Median lines will preserve where there is accretion, where there is erosion, where there is no change. And then use that median line and then multiply that median line at one level with the factor k, and you keep seeing it. What is it the properly extrapolated one? For everything, we require a kind of some benchmark data. So, as I mentioned, locally, I think many systems are predictable, and I could see the lakes because the behavior of a lake is actually controlled by something else. If there is rainfall, it bulges. If there is drought, and it shrinks. And those things are, can be easily explained. But I used to think that like this stratigraphic sequence, I think there are, somebody is, having in-depth knowledge in quantitative stratigraphy. I think these ideas have a lot of insights into quantitative stratigraphy. Even the sedimentology and the grain size distribution, in metallurgy, material science, they talk about grain growth mechanism. Grain growth mechanism has a lot of applications. How a crack propagates on a material. And we are actually looking at a big cosmological scale, how the cracks form and why some of the cracks that you see in a drought prone area is so systematically organized with hexagonal breaks. All that has some kind of process we can simulate on a discrete space, then at least explain in a toy model.
Thank you.
So initially you introduced fractals, and then you showed that we have one shape, and the change in the morphology of that shape with respect to time. So we can compute it through the functions that you have shown. So I was interested in understanding if this can be used in the third dimension as well. So
Oh, you mean computational fractal dimension?
yes, sir. So if I have a 3D object,
Yes,
uh,
yes.
but
So
even the DEM has X, Y, Z coordinates. So
yes, yes. No, so a simple planar object fractal dimension will compute through simple grid counting method. And in the 3D, we will actually put boxes. We call that box counting method.
okay,
And you take any rock body and it will have the dimension less than 3 and more than 2. It
okay,
is not exactly 3. And as per Euclidean geometry, we call that it's a 3-dimensional object. No. It has less than 3 and more than 2. Right? And you fix that in like a cube is a perfect example for a 3D,
hmm.
3-dimensional
Yes,
object.
sir.
And you put a rock inside the cube like box. And then not every space is occupied by the rock. The whole space is occupied by the rock, and then the rock itself is like a cube thing. And then you can say its dimension is 3. But there is void. In turn, it has a dimension lesser than 3. Just like the way I have shown Brownian motion,
Okay.
a kind of line, jagged line, and which is trying to occupy the whole space,
The
but it
rolling
could not.
stone method.
And there is a lot of void. And it is more than 1 and less than 2. In turn, when you take a 3D like rock like thing, it is not 3D, it is less than 3 and then more than 2 dimensions. And what we do is we keep, instead of putting the grids, we put boxes around the rock. And then those box sizes you refine it to smaller, smaller, smaller size, and then through how many boxes this rock is traversed. And then we derive a relationship between the box size versus the number of boxes through which the object is traversed. And then it gets you the fractal dimension which is more than 2 and less than 2. There were studies like there was one guy, I forgot, Orford. He was computing fractal dimensions of the rock outline by using simple fractal methods and also boundary dilation methods. So from fractal geometry, there is some boundary dilation method, which is also called Minkowski dimension. Minkowski dimension. No, for shape analysis, I know this geomorphology is full of shapes. For shape analysis, you are keen to study the shape analysis and shape related things in geomorphology, don't leave fractal geometry and mathematical geometry. These two would really, really help you.
Uh, problem is like I have two basin and I want to find out the fractal dimension of my uh, channels
Network.
network. Uh, so so there so from this understanding I understood that the all is depend on the B. X final pattern is depend on the B.
No, you are telling fractal dimension or roughness.
Uh,
So in fractal dimension computation, it's straightforward. Compute
oh,
RB for a river network. It's very simple. You compute RB, that is bifurcation ratio, and mean length ratio, and log RB by log RL is fractal dimension.
acha. So okay.
And which is modified by also multiplying this ratio log RB by log RL with L, that is the longest main channel length,
Okay.
main channel length.
Acha.
And these are improvements. As I mentioned, La Barbera and Rosso from Italy, then they have given straightforward measures.
Yeah.
You don't need to do any other box counting method there. It is log RB by log RL itself is a factor.
Okay. Yeah. So my general question was, um, suppose I need to compare two things, then the reference has to be same for the both things. If I vary the reference, then it is difficult to compare. Let's say in case of roughness, suppose I want to compare the roughness of two basin. I know that to calculate the roughness, I need to use the x upon b. And for this also, I need to calculate the x upon b. If the b are different, then final roughness value
roughness value
will be different. So in that case, how to compare the roughness between two basin?
Choose the same B.
Same B.
Same B for both the basins.
Okay.
Compute roughness.
Okay.
And then you see roughness is B dependent.
B dependent, huh?
B dependent. So some Bs would give a very least roughness, though the basin looks very highly rough for our naked eye.
Yeah.
So some Bs would give, though it looks very smooth and it gives a high roughness.
Correct.
It all depends on B.
Yeah. And selection of B, as far as I understood, it has some component of X. Is it like that?
Yes, certainly.
Yeah.
Not X and F function. We
Acha.
are taking functions, right? Roughness, superficial roughness.
Acha.
Superficial roughness or outline roughness.
Sorry.
Outline roughness I would take from the object.
Okay.
Just a black and white patch.
Uh,
The superficial roughness is it's actually ups and downs of the elevations within the basin.
okay. So that function will vary for the two basin, right? The
Yes, so two basins means two different physiographic constraints.
yes. So in that,
And you have variations.
yeah. So
Then,
sorry. So if the functions are different for two basin, then B will be different, right?
not necessary.
Not necessary.
Choose same B. Choose same B and then tell that with respect to this B, the roughness values are different for these two basins.
Okay.
And but derivation of B from the function is actually a tough task, and that is where adaptive morphology.
Okay.
Is it really worth understand going into the adaptive morphology? Say that there are much more important things that we can do through morphology than just adaptive morphology. But I would say if you really want to go beyond what was taught here, I would really recommend go for graph morphology.
Graph.
Graph morphology.
Graph morphology.
And just graph theory. The nodes and edges and what is the edge weight. Edge weight is simply the absolute difference of the two elevation values. And you can construct a graph. All these operations, you have a slightly different notations and the graph erosion, graph dilation, and then for explanation, in geomorphology, for explanation, yes, it would give a different direction. Using graph morphology, someone explained about the quantity geomorphology. It's really very unique and I'm sure it would be a original.
So in graph morphology, there is no reference, like, right? In
Difference in the sense? What?
no, like in case of roughness, there is a B, which
No, here the B is, we'll only take neighborhood of the nodes.
okay.
No, there is no specific shape of B.
Okay.
And because the moment you convert that into graph, actually it is losing its spatial significance. And you do the process and you will come back to the original basin and then you say these are the changes. But graphs, yes, I am not still confident.
Okay.
My students are very, very good. They just graduated 2 months ago.
Yeah. So in conclusion, so what do you suggest if I want to compare two basin? Which mathematical, which this approach, which one I should consider? Fractal, graph, or
Fractals, it doesn't consider multi-scale. It takes the data as it is and you put some cube counting method or extract river network and then compute log RB by log RL. That is the one aspect. In morphology, actually, it considers multi-scale version of the basin by the way of performing different cycles of opening, multi-scale openings. You are reducing the resolution. By the way of reducing resolution, you are computing pattern spectrum. We have seen that
yes,
area of the F opened by nth size B minus area of the F opened by n plus 1 size B.
Yes.
So that n, with change of n, and you are seeing the DEM at a different levels. And I would see that that is more, mathematically viable approach than simple factorization.
Thank you.
So if there's no other questions, then we thanks again Professor Dayasagar.
Thank you, Vikrant. And it's a nice opportunity for me.
Many thanks for this marathon lectures.
Yeah,
So
I
all throughout the
enjoyed
day.
because they are all very busy. I'm sure I will contact them after.